I'm Katie Trazo. I'm for the soil because the soil nourishes us.
Hi, everybody. Jeff Ishee here with another edition of For the Soil, a conversation. Wow, we've got a lot of ground to cover. No pun intended. We do have a lot of ground to cover. It's spring around the Commonwealth of Virginia. Farmers are busy working the soil and getting ready for the growing season of 2022. And we're going to get to our podcast in just a moment as we welcome back to the program Nicolette Niman. This is part 2 of our extended conversation with Nicolette Niman. She is the author of a book called Defending Beef, and she has very interesting opinions about soil health, about human health, and about many topics involving agriculture. We'll continue that conversation in just a few moments with Nicolette Niman. But first of all, I wanted to remind everyone that you can stay abreast of what's going on with soil health at our website, forthesoil.org, and that is the digit 4, thesoil.org, and there you will find the principles of soil health. You'll find numerous resources and points of contact in cooperative extension, NRCS, USDA, DCR, all those acronyms. You'll find a lot of resources available at the website forthesoil.org. But also I would like to ask you, if you will, to take a pledge to improve the soil health at your own operation, your own home, your own vegetable garden. And you can do that by checking out our website, forthesoil.org, and there at the top, right on the menu bar, you'll see the area for pledge. And take that pledge today. We do appreciate that. It shows at least to us, that you are committed. And I think we're all committed as a community. Those who listen to this podcast, we are committed to improving soil health around our region. Well, let's now go to the show with part 2 of Nicolette Niman. Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Nicolette Niman, author of Defending Beef, and she recently addressed Virginia farmers at a winter grazing conference in Weirs Cay, Virginia. That was hosted by the Virginia Forage and Grasslands Council, and we wanted to thank them for hosting such a great event. A lot of advocates there considering soil health. And this is now part 2 of Eric Bendfeldt and my conversation with Nicolette Niman as we were discussing the relationship between soil health and human health.
Well, there's a very strong connection between what we're doing on our farms and human health. So, of course, there are the people that are living on the farms. We have to worry about their health. And then there's that larger question of what kind of food are we producing and what kind of food are Americans eating right now? And is the way we're farming fully supporting human health? And what I've been researching for the last couple decades is how our farm systems have gotten more and more focused on production, and we're subsidizing, as a nation, we've been subsidizing a lot of production of very simple, large monocrop things like wheat and soy, and corn. And unfortunately, more and more of our modern diet is based on processed foods that are made with those kind of raw ingredients. And we have moved away from a really nutrient-rich diet that our ancestors, or not even that long ago, maybe our grandparents were eating, right? They might have had some potatoes and something green maybe, and then a piece of meat, right? And that's a really healthy diet, actually. That's a diet that has a lot of nutrients in it. It has a lot of vitamins. It has a lot of minerals. It has a lot of protein. And more importantly, protein, vitamins, and minerals that our bodies can readily use, okay? Very absorbable, very available, bioavailable. And what's happening is in the U.S. and throughout the industrialized world, people have transitioned to eating more and more processed food. And when I was doing the research for my book, Defending Beef, originally I thought, well, I'm going to kind of argue why we need to have, meat and milk and eggs in the human diet, because these are rich sources of protein and minerals and vitamins. And I realized the more I worked on it and thought about it and looked at what people are actually eating today, the real question is, how much processed food are you eating? Okay. And if you're eating let's say a Cliff Bar. I hate to pick on one individual company, but it's a good example. It's sort of thought of as a healthy food, but it's really a highly processed food with a lot of processed ingredients, and it's got a lot of sweetener in it. And so that's, one of these kind of like energy bars or something, to me, is a good example of what is wrong with the way people are eating today. And I think this big shift that's happened towards processed foods and away from real whole foods that our grandparents would have been eating, and definitely our ancestors for thousands of years before that would have been eating, is that we've moved away from foods where there's a lot of nourishment for every calorie. So now we eat a lot of bread, crackers, cookies, chips, energy bars, pasta even. I mean, I like pasta. I'm not saying never eat pasta. But if you look at your diet and you ask yourself, how much nourishment is contained in every calorie? Okay? So a calorie, some people think that's nourishment. It's not really. That's just a calorie. That's just energy. Your body needs a ton of nutrients. And if you're putting a lot of food into your body that has a high number of calories but doesn't have a lot of actual nutrients in it, you're going to start having a lot of health problems because you're going to get overweight. You're going to end up with diabetes. So to me, meat, and especially meat that's raised on, or not just meat, milk, and eggs, especially if it is raised on grass, that is the kind of food we need to have more and more of in our modern diet. We need to rediscover that food as a really important source of nourishment. Okay, so we got to stop thinking about calories so much and start thinking about nourishment. And when you do that, you immediately see how valuable the meat, milk, and eggs is to the human diet.
Speaking of processed foods, I'd like to get your take on plant-based proteins, and this actually came up in the conference today. McDonald's restaurant recently announced that they're expanding the distribution of what they call the McPlant burger. Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea of where this trend in processed foods is going, and what is the impact on the cattle industry and overall agriculture?
Well, I think it's very important that everybody in agriculture understand these trends and be aware of them. And if you're raising, animal-based foods, it's important for you to understand there's a big conversation out there about more plant-based. We need to eat more plant-based. My question is plant-based inherently healthy? The answer is no. Okay, it's very obvious. And a lot of these plant-based burgers, like the one, I don't want to pick on McDonald's here. I haven't actually looked at their product specifically, but I have looked at dozens of these faux meat, fake meat products, and almost all of them are very highly processed food with a lot of highly processed ingredients that, just going back to what I was just saying a minute ago, are very rich in calories and in a lot of cases high in salt, high in sugar, not necessarily with the faux burgers sugar, but definitely high in salt. And then there's very, very little nourishment in that. So you get a lot of calories, you don't get a lot of nourishment. And by the way, the nourishment that isn't contained in there is kind of sprayed on from a mechanical sprayer. It's literally vitamins that they're spraying on top of the food, which in my view is not real vitamins and minerals. Okay, so if you want to have, I think, vibrant health over the long term, yes, you want to have plants. I mean, honestly, I've had a lot of conversations with people that follow a strictly carnivore diet, and I think that has a place in all of this conversation too, because you can treat some human health conditions quite effectively with a carnivore diet for a period of time. But I think over the longer term, what people are is omnivores, and I think that plants are a good, important part of the diet. Vegetables, fruits, salads, yes. Lots of those are good foods. So are nuts, eggs, but so are fish, and so are meat. And I think variety is important, but ultimately the most important thing is real whole foods. And so when you're talking about these things that are replacing meat, in my view, if it's a processed food, it is not a good substitute for meat because you're switching a real whole, extremely nutrient-rich food and you're substituting in a processed food that's probably biologically dead, probably doesn't have a lot of nutritional vibrancy to it. It's not really going to support your health over the long term. It's just a processed food. So I don't think it's the right solution. You asked me, though, Jeff, about the how much do cattle producers need to worry about that and stuff. And I would say we should be aware of it. I don't think we need to get too worried about it, though, because I think over the long term, people try it, they maybe do it for a little while, and then they go back to real food. I mean, I that's what I'm hoping, and that's what I've seen. So at least they get away from vegan diets. 90% of people, and this is what the research shows, 90% of people that become vegans for a period of time return to omnivory. And I think we need to focus on providing people with healthy, real, whole foods that are a variety of different types of foods, plants and animals.
Well, thank you. And then also with thinking about soil health, a colleague often says we need to mulch the soil. We also probably need to mulch our guts as well. And since we're at a Forage and Grassland Council meeting talking about ruminants, and I also think that probably the role of fiber in a nutritional diet probably is not maybe emphasized enough. And I think as cattle farmers or ranchers, the importance of looking at the harmonious balance of the system is really important.
Well, I think a good diet has variety in it. And I also think, I just want to make one other point that we haven't said yet, but it's really important, is healthy soil is one that has a lot of biological activity in it. So it has a lot of different kind of microorganisms and insects and earthworms and lots of things in it, and they're diverse. And there's a ton of research showing that the more of that you have in the soil, the more nourishment will be in the forages, if it's, for grazing animals, and also the plants and, fruits, vegetables, greens, whatever, that we're actually directly consuming is healthier. It has a higher nutrient content. So there's a really strong connection between soil health and human health and what we're eating. And that's something that hasn't gotten a lot of attention over the years. But I think people are starting to talk about it, and that's really good.
And now one question, let's talk about the diet of the beef cow. How important is it what they eat? Mm-hmm. Here in the Shenandoah Valley, we have a very strong poultry industry. Mm-hmm. And the biggest secret in the valley is that poultry producers will feed litter, poultry manure to the cattle. Mm-hmm. Do you have an opinion?
I do. I think that we need to... poultry litter is very useful, composted, to go on land and to be part of, returning fertility to the soil. But quite honestly, if you're directly feeding that to cattle, I do not think that's a healthy system. I have a lot of concerns about that. I've written about that in the past. I've done a lot of research on it. Ultimately, I think if we want healthy animals, we have to understand how their bodies were meant to work. And of course, the cattle is a human creation in terms of our breeding, and they had wild ancestors that we developed into the cattle, but they're not meant to eat animal byproducts and animal manures. In their natural environment and their natural diet, it would be a variety of different things, lots of things, but it would be foraged things. And I think, the whole mad cow disease that happened in Europe, there's pretty good evidence that came from feeding animal byproducts to the cattle. And I think when we kind of ignore the laws of nature, we end up going down bad places. And I think cattle, have this miraculous rumen. Yes, they can technically eat a lot of different kinds of things. But I think what we want to do is we always want to have a diet for the animals that will keep them healthy and make sure that the food that's coming out of those animals is healthy and full of nutrition, and where we don't have to worry about, it's somehow spreading diseases among the animals or creating novel diseases. I mean, the BSE thing was really kind of a novel disease that resulted from providing a type of food. It was really slaughterhouse wastes in that case in Europe. That was because a lot of, direct meat essentially was being given, and bone meal and kinds of things to animals that are not meant to eat that kind of stuff. So I think when we tinker too much with natural systems, we have bad things happen. So let's stick with trying to understand what the animal is meant to consume, and then trying to replicate something like that in their diet.
Thank you so much for being our guest.
It's my pleasure.
Well, Dr. Rory McGuire, a professor at Virginia Tech, brings us up to date on one of the 4 core principles of soil health, and that is keeping the soil covered.
Keeping the soil covered is very important in terms of preventing soil erosion. Soil erosion is one of the biggest ways to decrease soil quality. If you lose the soil, you're losing the valuable part of your land. So keeping the soil covered prevents soil erosion. And when raindrops directly impact the soil, they can form a crust on the soil surface. They actually break the soil structure right at the soil surface. And once the soil structure is broken at the surface, you don't get any infiltration of water anymore. And of course, if water doesn't infiltrate, it runs off. And when it runs off, it takes the soil with it. So keeping the soil covered is extremely important in terms of preventing surface crust formation and soil erosion.
For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you have a specific question about soil health, just contact your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts and Gillicuddy. All rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee.